Welcome to the DMF. I am your host, Justin Yachts, and today is part 7 of my interview with Evan Crooke. He is a distributor, a producer, a director, and a writer. Enjoy.
Well, I don't, script development I mean, you got to have a story that it's important to know what kind of story you want to tell. I think it's important to know what moves you. Ideas, as we were talking about, are very important. All ideas are important, and then ideas that connect to your passion are vital. What is something that you care about that you believe others will be um, inspired by or moved by or whatever, right? And then understanding how that idea translates to something that feels fresh and something that feels commercial. What is commercial? Commercial means really that it's more than just appealing to you and your family that might enjoy it. It's to the masses, right? And something fresh means that it's an idea that feels like we haven't quite experienced this before, right? We're all looking for an outlet in entertainment. When we watch a movie or we watch a TV show, the goal is to escape our life and enjoy a fantasy or enjoy something of different levels that happen to another set of characters and so on. But if we see the same shtick over and over again, that becomes a cliche. So when you are embarking on developing a story, the first part is what passionately drives you, and secondly, what are the ideas behind that, and how can you convey that in a way that feels innovative. And I think you've got to start with either you're a writer yourself or you work with a writer or writers, and you've got to be able to really interrogate yourself and interrogate your own ideas very well, and not take anything for granted. You cannot assume that what's close to you is going to be important to someone else. Arrogance is very dangerous. Pride is a very dangerous vehicle. Understanding that exploring ideas is a journey and it takes a great deal of time and it's painful. It's very time consuming and painful to explore ideas that, and also going into areas that I think any good storytelling involves the writer, producer, the storyteller, the director. And if you're all those things, you have to be able to go into areas that are uncomfortable for you. If you're going into areas that you know you can nail as an actor or as a writer or a director, and you know that it's basically an extension of you and you can nail it all, with no problem, then one, you're not challenging yourself. Two, you're not working. And three, you're not building. In order to build, you've got to step into areas that are new for you and areas that are uncomfortable. But to me, that's the first part of storytelling.
Is there a specific, say you're optioning a book or
Right.
you're trying to come up with an idea?
Right.
Where are some of the starting points that you try to find? Like what, like, is
If
it do
you're,
you,
yeah. Sorry. I think I know what you mean. So let's take. I have a book that we have an option on, and I have a TV show that we're developing as well, and so on. So those all came from stories that I read, right? So I read this particular novella, and I thought it was very interesting. There really wasn't a lot on the market right now, meaning television or film, that was out there. And we all know that Hollywood is a place that, in spite of its framework, technically it should take risk, but Hollywood is actually the last place in the world to take risk. And anytime that someone tries something different, everybody anticipates that item to fail, almost even hopes that it will fail. And then everyone says, of course, oh my God, I knew that was going to be a success. You know, if you look at something like Leaving Las Vegas, which was doomed to fail, no one wanted to touch it. And until Nicolas Cage decided to take it on, if you will. It it's the idea of exploring something that is untouched. And so, first of all, find a story that resonates with you. Find a story that moves you. Find a story that
Mm.
you think is, for me, it's one, is a story entertaining? Number one. That's the number one thing. A lot of artists believe, and their opinions, that you have to be connected to the story that you want to tell. And while that's true, and while passion is really important, we are in the business of selling stories. And once again, we're in the business. This is a business built on art. It's not the other way around. And so if you recognize that this is a business, then what's the first goal or the first objective behind the business of our industry? The first goal is you have to be able to you find an idea that you think that you would pay. First of all, you find a story that you would pay money to watch. If you wouldn't pay to watch it, then why are you doing it? If you're making a story that's about an expression of how badly you feel you've been wrong, or you're making a story
Right.
about how bad you feel that some injustice was done to someone else, or whatever. If it's not entertaining, who cares? I think filmmakers have this notion because we're very much in our own heads. So it's very easy for us to become narcissistic. It's easy for us to become involved in our own worlds. It's easy for us to have tunnel vision and not really be connected to the masses and understand what is commercial versus what isn't commercial. By definition, what is commercial is something that you're willing to pay for and watch, and not just you, a bunch of people, right?
Can you give some examples of things of the difference between a non-commercial and a commercial? I think a lot of people would like to understand that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, let's look at Oppenheimer, for example.
Hmm.
Oppenheimer was a story that's commercial on its concept because it's a terrifying concept, the end of the world, nuclear war, the beginning of the atomic bomb, Oppenheimer himself, all the things that he went through, his life, the secrecy, this, all these things. And there's a history there. So that in its framework is pretty commercial. The director, who's wonderful and did a great job with it, made some choices within the editing of that. And he made some choices to get a little, I'll call it artsy. And
Hmm.
the moments that I'm referring to in that film is when you've got, the atoms and moving around and this, and it almost
Yeah.
looks like a collage and some kind of dark version of a Monet painting or something like that, or whatever. You've got this
Yeah.
moment where the director has sort of spun off into the oblivion of Oppenheimer's mind as well as the world of
Yeah.
atoms and the explosions of atoms. For most people, that resonated well, but not all. If you talk to
Hmm.
scientists and you talk to other people, some of them found that annoying because we went from this great storytelling mechanism and
Hmm.
great editing and so on. And then we threw in this dab of paint, if you will, in the middle of this thing. And it became where it felt like we got two different movies going on. We've got a little artsy fartsy kind of stuff going on,
Hmm.
and then we've got this great storytelling going on, right? Does that make any
Are,
sense?
are you referring to like at the beginning when he's flashing back to, to the atoms being made and everything, and he's talking about being sick
Yeah, I think
type
I'm
thing?
referring to more later on in the film. It gets more and more. There is visuals that are abstract. There are visuals that
Hmm.
are abstract that are
Oh,
not
okay. Example,
necessary. Yeah. So
the boardroom scene when
yes, correct,
he's having the
correct,
he's sleeping
correct,
with her, and
right.
we see what Emily Blunt's character
Right.
is seeing.
Correct.
She's seeing
And
him, and he's
right,
completely exposed. Yeah,
right, and very, very abstract. The problem
yeah.
with mixing real abstractions with a story that involves history, almost like a documentary to some degrees, and then of course fiction and mixing those. Now you're creating another element that artists can relate to because we work in the
Mm.
abstract, but someone who has a linear mind of thinking or a very scientific mind of thinking, for example, scientists who go off and see that movie, engineers who go off and see that movie, programmers who go off and see that movie may react very differently when you start throwing in a splash
Mm.
of abstract art and interpretation, if you will, because it almost becomes like a special effect that takes us out of the movie, that takes us out of the storytelling, right?
I would raise this point though.
Yep.
I think one of the reasons why it still works in his films, you're right, that is the abstract, but I think he's kind of this is like what his eighth, big,
Yeah.
large budget film,
Sure.
and he's kind of created this set this motion of these type of films where yes, it's very commercial and stuff, but it's going to have these apps. So I think
Sure.
he's
It's his
taught a
style.
lot of
Right.
that audience that
Yes.
that's his style in some ways.
Correct.
That, and I think also the Barbie, coming out together and
Sure.
Barbenheimer and
I
putting it
I
together.
I got it. It
Mm.
worked for me, but from talking
Yeah,
to people who have a different way of thinking and a different way of interpreting the world and
yeah, they
it,
were turned off
but
by that.
that they were turned off by those moments, right? It sort of brought them out of the story. Um, there
Like
are
when they're in the also when they're in the boardroom and the very end, and it's like
right, right,
we're creating an explosion inside the room or whatever. Yeah,
right,
I could see
yeah,
a scientist being
right.
like, "What is this?"
Right. Let's think of art house films
Hmm.
that I mean there's the ones that won the any art house film that won Sundance or Tribeca. What that means is that piece of art was just commercial enough
Yeah,
to reach the masses. And it's only one or two films out of any of these festivals. The rest of them don't reach it ever. There's
yeah,
a reason for that. It's where an artist expresses themselves as opposed to telling a story. You follow me? In
yeah,
my opinion,
absolutely.
in my opinion, if I'm angry today and I break out my camera and I'm going to show some footage of an expression of my anger, that's not storytelling. That's
Yeah.
just me ranting or being an artist throwing the paint on the wall.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to find an example
Like
that
Nicholas Winding Refn's was it Only God Forgives, where he's like really experimenting with color and stuff. And I like it,
right.
but I understand why a commercial audience would not, because it's very
Right.
hard to follow.
Right. Here's another example. Stanley Kubrick's Clockwork Orange versus
Hmm.
The Shining. Why is The Shining more commercial? The Shining is hands down the most commercial film that Stanley Kubrick ever did, and
Yeah,
one of the most successful films ever made. Clockwork Orange, successful, but nowhere near what The Shining. Why is
agreed.
Stephen King writes stories that are entertaining. Number one, entertaining. It takes us
Mhm.
out of our reality and puts us into a reality that we are not used to, that we can explore. We can live through this other reality and have fun, right? We can be scared, we can be worried, we can enjoy, and it's a story that affects emotions in all of us that we can go down on this ride.
Well, it's kind of
And
following a three-act structure as well.
right,
You've got a
exactly, right,
beginning, middle, and
right,
end.
exactly, right.
Clockwork Orange is kind of
So it's an
the middle is,
experiment.
but
Really, it's an
I
experimental
love
film.
it. But
Right.
yeah,
So do I. I love it too. It's an
I
experimental film, but really, it's the artists of Stanley Kubrick experimenting with things that were profound at the time, violence, all kinds of things, sexuality, um, lots of things going on in that really it really hadn't been done, and almost one would say even pushing the the censors,
yeah,
if you will, or the motion picture rating board and everything
yeah.
else to the 90th power. But there's a big difference between that story development and that framework versus the framework of The Shining.
Yeah.
And so you've got a very successful director having done both. No, not much different. I mean, Clockwork Orange is not much different than the experimentation of Memento. I mean, they're different
Yeah.
pieces, but the framework is very experimental. Okay, so why is Oppenheimer much more successful than Memento? Memento, once again, an experiment, an expression of what the artist wants to express,
Yeah.
something new and different, but yet not everyone's going to like it and jump into it. Whereas Oppenheimer is more of your traditional framework of storytelling. And
It's
so,
very tight as
yes, very
well.
tight.
It holds your eye. So even though he has a lot of dialogue in it, the way he's shooting it and the way it's cut leads it to feel more like a commercial film, you know.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it gets to me, it gets down to the story. Everything gets
Mm,
down to the story, and it gets down to um, does that story have a series of beats within each scene that continues to project us forward, and the objectives of the characters stay focused, and is it something that we can relate to, and
mm,
can we have clarity without getting confused, and can it hold our attention without dazzling us too much that we get distracted, right? And
yeah.
so that becomes sort of a very focused road that takes us down this path. And versus art, just pure
Yeah.
film video for art, the difference is an unstructured um, storytelling, more of our emotions. I think
Yeah.
house films really are an expression of our emotions as artists versus commercial pieces are very structured to understand and relate what's connecting to our environment and what's connecting to the masses. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, look at James Cameron's films. That's one of the reasons why he tells universal stories.
Right.
So almost anyone can relate. So it's
Yeah.
no wonder that like his films relate all over the world and do really well because he's talking about these universal themes.
Right.
Um, you could say even though he can sometimes get in the way there, but for the majority of it, it is very tight commercial,
Sure. I mean,
commercial project.
yeah, I mean, there is the times that artists will want to put their mark, if you will, on a film that relates to who they
Yeah.
are. But um, I think any good artist is definitely in touch with their environment and really understands that our number one, our job as creators, our job is to create something that's entertaining. In order to create something entertaining, we have to create chaos.
Yeah.
And in order to create chaos, we have to think of something that moves us and follow that chaos, and then we have to structure it so that multiple people from different walks of life can relate to that chaos, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would add also Tarantino. He's very much been able to take his artistic side and combine it with the commercial side.
He's balanced it well.
Yeah.
And but first and foremost, uh, the number one thing about Tarantino that's successful is he knows how to entertain.
Yeah.
And people are afraid of the two words, entertainment and commercial. Artists
Yeah.
have this notion of, I can't use the word entertainment or commercial. I'm somehow selling myself out.
Yeah. They think
That's
it's
a,
like lessening their product. And it's like, yes.
when my experience in going briefly to different, I was at different schools and so on. And some teachers had the philosophy, let's use the medium to express how we feel. And other teachers had the philosophy, if you want to make a living at this industry and you want to be good at this industry, this is what you need to understand and what you need to do, right? And I subscribe to the latter, which is
Yeah.
we're in the entertainment business. Our job is to wow and entertain the audience.
Mm.
And if we can put something in the entertainment that we're creating, something within the chaos that we create, even dramas have chaos, because the moment that an actor, a character wants something and the other actor doesn't get it, that's a form of chaos.
Yeah.
So, something that we care about. But first and foremost, um, does it excite us? Does it make us want to watch? Does it make us feel happy or sad or angry? Is it something that's going to hold our attention? Is it
Yeah.
something that we want to put our energy into? Watching something requires energy. And either you watch one thing on channel one or watch something else on this other streaming service or whatever it is, you're committing a portion of your time, and that requires energy and attention. And so our job as creators is to entertain first and foremost. And secondly, our job is to find something within that entertainment that feels fresh and is important to us. Otherwise, what's the
Mm.
point in doing it? If we don't have passion in what we're doing,
Yeah.
forget it, right? But we can't forget that this is a business, and we do have to find a way to entertain our audience. There's just no way around that, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, if the audience decides one day they want rocks, then we'll give them rocks. But right now, they don't want movies of rocks or TV shows of rocks and just rocks. They want a really exciting story that's going to take them out of their own world. Someone who's working a 40-hour a week, a 9 to 5 job, and has 3 kids and is having difficulty time in life, or maybe they're going through a divorce or whatever it is. When they come home, they want to escape. Our job is
Yeah.
to give them that chance to escape. And,
Yeah.
and a lot of times artists forget what their responsibility is. You, as a First Amendment creator, and a pioneer of the First Amendment, your job is to help, in the fictional side, entertain our audience. Now, if you're in the documentary side, or you're in the reality side, or you're a correspondent for war and news or whatever, then your job is to report the facts. That's a very
Yeah.
different situation than fiction. So I'm going to assume that when we talk about these things, we're talking about fiction. And when we're talking
Yes.
about fiction, our job is to entertain. That's
Do you
it.
think though there's a danger though? I mean, you mentioned the guy that's working, 9 to 5. Do you think there's also I think sometimes there's a tendency to dumb it down for that person and not realizing that that person may be able to be risen up
Mhm.
by participating in like a film like Oppenheimer. The fact that so many people saw it, is a testament to something new happening. Even Barbie. Barbie is not a traditional. I mean, there's certain traditional elements of it, but it's very if you really like break it down and look at it, it's kind of an indie film in some
Yeah,
ways.
sure.
So I wonder if things are changing in some, and I think a lot of that has to do with Netflix. I mean, like I never would have thought a Squid Game would be this huge seller.
Mhm.
So I wondered though, is so what I'm saying is there a danger to just looking at it like that? Because if we did
No,
look at it like no,
I think that we have a bad connotation of entertainment. Look, lots of things that have been created on Broadway, off Broadway, film, television, so on, that reaches the masses are all by definition commercial, and they're
yeah,
all entertaining. So what you're referring to, in my opinion, is, can you break the mold? Can you do something that the audience has not seen before? Or the key is, can you
yeah,
give the audience something that feels like they have not seen before? The reality is, Hollywood has made the same movie about 10,000 times.
yeah,
So the trick is that, can you be the magical musician that we need to be and let the rabbit appear out of the blue, and can you deliver it to the audience where it feels fresh and new, right? And so
yeah,
Squid Game feels fresh and new. When Hunger Games came out, it felt fresh and new.
yeah,
Oppenheimer felt fresh and new. But the reality is, all those films and movies, they have been done in one way or the other through variations of hundreds of different, thousands of different pieces of product. And so it is constantly trying to find a way to tell a story in a slightly different manner. It's all it is,
Yeah.
you know.
I,
And so,
I understand all of that. I
yeah,
understand what you're saying by that. I mean more, say some executive comes in and says, okay, this is reading the script and they go, this is too much for
yeah,
the 9 to 5 person. How do you know that?
they can't handle it.
How do you know, see, that's the thing. I think there's a danger in going to that because we have an idea of it, but
Right,
we don't know. I think,
right.
it's that gray area.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, a lot of times, on the Killing Jar, for example, the very
Mm,
end of the Killing Jar that I directed years ago, I deliberately chose to let Michael Sanford's, that's the character, he's dying. We hear the ambulances coming in the background, and Brett Collin, who plays Michael Sanford, his legs are twitching, and he's in the arms of Tamlin Tamita, and he's saying, "Can you hear them? Can you hear them?" And the camera comes up, and we sort of pull up in this crane shot. It was very interesting to me. I had
yeah.
some distributors say to me, "Oh, does he die?" This is back in 1997, 98, and they
Yeah.
were worried at that time that it would be a selling problem if he died. And I remember talking to one distributor. He said, "Well," he called me
Really?
on the phone. He's like, "Well, does he die?" And I said, "Well, what do you think?" And I
Uh,
said, "Do you want him to die? Do you not want him to die?" And I said, "You realize his legs are twitching and you hear the sounds." And the guy said to me, "Oh, you're right. Yeah, yeah, his legs are twitching. Yeah, you're right." And he's like, "And maybe he lives." I said, "Well, do you want him to live?" And he said, "Well, yeah, that would be better." I said, "Well, then he lives." I left it ambiguous, right? And
yeah.
so
Well, I think with the killing,
the problem with Hollywood and the studios that you're getting on is that we get trapped into a format, we get trapped into rituals, and following rituals and formats leads to cliches, right? But
yes.
those are safe mechanisms for the engine, which means that the studios that have the money, because the more risk they take, the more risk there's something can go wrong. But every
Yeah.
time that something magical happens, it's because someone broke the mold and took the risk. Um, and and so I think, um, first of all, studio executives need to go out and make a movie. First of all, each of them, before making decisions about making movies.
Well,
Uh,
that's what George Lucas said. He said that like when he started, they were all in the world. Now he came back, I think when he's doing episode one, he realized, oh, I'm just surrounded by people that like don't really know anything about movies. They want to
correct,
pull the audience by doing focus groups and be like,
correct.
if this works, then this works. It's like,
They're data driven, and
yeah,
artists such as George Lucas and Christopher Nolan and other artists, and all of us, hopefully, we are driven by what we feel
yeah,
and connections to our emotions and those connections to our environment. With the
yeah,
inability to not to be connected to your emotions and your environment, you're in big trouble, because
yeah,
we are selling entertainment. And as cold as that sounds, and we are selling a story. But in the end, what we're really selling is an emotion. We're saying, we recognize you have your things going on in your busy life. You've got all this stuff, but we want to take you down this path where you're going to walk away and we're going to have you feel something. That's called an emotion. And we're going to sell you on that emotion. So that's the creative juice. That's the passion.
yeah,
But the framework is always based on the backbone of the engine, which
yeah,
is, this is entertainment. But you can have that tug of war between the engine and the emotion that you sell, and it's a balance. But in the
yeah,
end, we're selling an emotion is what we're doing. And so with Oppenheimer, the emotion that I walked out with was I was completely terrified. I was terrified for the world. I was saddened and deeply terrified for humanity. And if that was the emotion that Christopher wanted me as a viewer to have, then he succeeded. Um, and other movies, it would be a different emotion that we walk away with. But generally, every story gets down to one single thread, one nucleus, one idea that should be consistent throughout each scene, laid in there in the subtext, and very clear that what the message is that you want your audience to feel, not get, feel. If you're saying that you want your audience to understand and get, you're missing the point of being a director or being creative.
Yeah. You want them to feel it.
Feel it. Because if you feel it, then you've lived it. If you've lived it, then you understand it and you have learned it. And so it is very important that every artist, in my opinion, is very much connected to your environment. And what that means is, do you have the gift and the ability that when you walk into a restaurant, can you tell the waitress who's over at another table, can you tell that she's having a difficult day? Can you tell and can you read perhaps into it that maybe she's struggling to make ends meet? Are you able to tell that maybe her husband the night before beat her up? Are you able to tell these small details? Can you see the marks on her wrist? Can you see that maybe when she comes over and gets your food, maybe she has a slash across her wrist? All the small details of all humanity tell us all the things that we need to know. And when we take those details and string them together, we form emotions. And from that, we can create stories. And so without being able to be connected to humans and being able to be connected to our environment, you can't tell a story. I've had filmmakers come to me and say, oh, well, how do I get to be Francis Ford Coppola? Or how do I get to be Spielberg? And they don't have a clue as to what it makes them tick or what makes them enjoy things.
There's a through line that goes through.
Right.
And it's making you feel something.
Exactly. And so why do anything? Why be creative? Why do anything? It's a process that each person has to explore. Why are they in our industry and why are they doing what they're doing? Right. But one thing for sure that I've known is that all the people who are best at this, they are good at listening and they are very good at really feeling and empathizing with their environment. They're able to pick up on what another set of human beings are going through, and they're able to pick up on those emotions. And it's a special gift.
Okay, that about does it for part 7 of my interview with Evan Crooke. I hope you enjoyed it. I want to thank him personally. As always, like, share, and subscribe, and consider checking out the YouTube channel. And check out me at Justin Yachts. And I will see you next time on the DMF.